Atoms for Peace, the song, dates to 2006 when it appeared on The Eraser, a solo album by Tom York of Radiohead. The song became a band after a cast of characters were assembled by Tom to play his record live in 2010. The supergroup/side project includes Radiohead producer Nigel Godrich, Red Hot Chili Peppers bassist Flea, session drummer Joey Warnaker, and percussionist Mauro Rafosco. Except, perhaps don't call them a supergroup, because Tom told Rolling Stone he'll knock the teeth out of anyone who would dare say that to his face. The concept of Atoms for Peace dates back to 1953 when President Dwight D. Eisenhower gave his Atoms for Peace address to the United Nations General Assembly. In essence, at the very beginning of the Cold War, he volunteered the United States and all Allied countries to begin the disarmament movement. Tom has not yet indicated a direct relationship between the speech and his choice of band moniker. After Atoms for Peace, the band completed an 8-day tour, including a headlining slot at Coachella 2010. Tom felt things had gone so well that he asked them into the studio for 3 days to record. For the next 2 years, Tom would tinker with those recordings on his laptop and in his studio, with the odd conceit of making them into a record on which it is impossible to discern which sounds were human and which were from a machine. This mission makes it clear. Atoms for Peace are an artistic, heady, game-changing group, and they are people who are considered to be serious musicians, with all the taciturn attitudes and somberness that implies. That is why it's been such a surprise to see Tom and Nigel thoroughly enjoying themselves, while they participate in some extraordinary press to support the release of the Atoms for Peace album, Amok. One of the dead good jokes of the press campaign started off innocuously, with a photo. Respected British fashion magazine Dazed and Confused put Tom on their cover. One of the interior images became an instant meme on Tumblr, where Tom was placed into the famous Edvard Munch painting The Scream. Around that time, Tom gave an inspired interview to Esquire magazine, done entirely in quotes, about what he's learned. One of the more telling items read, "My dad taught me to always expect someone coming around the bend on the wrong side of the road, right at me. I was always to assume that would be the case. He tried to teach me to be very suspicious of people, not to trust. I think he took it a bit too far when I was a kid. I had to unlearn that one." Radiohead fans and the music press will never forget the 1998 release of the documentary film Meeting People is Easy. It carefully catalogued the band's dislike for speaking to the press and the fatigue that goes with touring. It exposed the repetitive nature of interviews and showed exasperated members of the band reacting differently. Some resorted to taking the piss out of journalists, while others simply shrugged and fell deeper into their own weariness. At the time, Tom and Nigel were in their late 20s. In the Atoms for Peace era, both men are in their early 40s, and it seems they've decided, quite consciously, to start enjoying life. An interesting choice, considering they are halfway through it. In an interview with The Guardian, Tom said, "And the irony is that Radiohead have just done this big world tour last year, and for the most part we had the best time we've ever had. And a lot of dance music is very angry, in a good way. But yes, the idea was for once in my life just to enjoy the energy of it and not want to pull it apart." Tom found himself with an unlikely hobby that appears to give him great joy: DJing. Along with Nigel, he has played DJ sets in several major cities around the world under the banner Atoms for Peace. The newfound sense of lightheartedness includes another major shift in Tom and Nigel, a move towards accessibility. The pair began using their social media accounts on a regular basis and with a growing enthusiasm, and to express their political and social worldviews. The duo have used Twitter and Tumblr to weigh in on climate change, tax havens in the UK, and to much fanfare, disavowing all music streaming services, with a particular eye on the most popular among them, Spotify. In response to a paper on copyright and creation from a group at the London School of Economics, Nigel took to his Tumblr to address the concept of free content versus copyright-protected materials, and ripped into Spotify, saying, "The situation also enables music streaming services such as Spotify to gain traction by giving a best-case solution, generating revenue barely more than piracy itself, but bringing with it the justification that something is better than nothing. If Spotify reaches its goal of gaining a definitive hold on the new delivery system, then another precedent will be set, and the idea that recorded music is practically worthless will become normal. This has already started happening. And by the way, musicians should consider themselves lucky to be given such a marvellous platform for their freedom of expression. Thanks. Prior to opening that can of intellectual worms, the duo participated in the internet's biggest online community by doing a Reddit Ask Me Anything, better known as an AMA, where literally anyone in the world can ask any question they like. They answered the queries from the technical to the ridiculous, indirectly and with signature British wit. In response to a question about Stanley Donwood, the man who has long created Radiohead's album and promotional art, and who created the art for Amok, Tom had this to say. I met him first day at art college, and he had a better hat and suit on than me. That pissed me off. So I figured I'd either end up really not liking this person at all, or working with him for the rest of my life. Another unexpected press appearance came when Tom showed up on Alec Baldwin's radio show Here's the Thing on WNYC. Alec addressed Tom's notorious dislike of speaking with the press, saying Tom did it on an as-needed basis. Tom replied, I kind of need to explain what I'm doing a bit with the Atoms for Peace thing. Just a little bit, because it's something different, and some vague effort to explain myself occasionally, I think, is morally acceptable. In the course of the interview, he would try out a southern accent at Alec's request, admit that around the time of OK Computer, the album that preceded Meeting People Is Easy, he was having a troubled relationship with his guitar, and that at age 7, he wanted to be Brian May of Queen. One way to keep things interesting on the press circuit is having one celebrity interview another. That's what Interview magazine did when they got Daniel Craig, the current incarnation of James Bond and a long-time Radiohead superfan, to conduct a Q&A with Tom. Daniel began the interview by informing Tom that he'd never done one before, and that if he asked him anything stupid, Tom should tell him to off. Most of the questions were routine, but an interesting bit did surface when Tom told a story about his primary school days. One of my first experiences in the music department was walking into one of the music rooms, and there was Thomas Dolby, before he was Thomas Dolby, with this synthesizer that he'd built and all this stuff, and I was like, I want that in my life. Tom turned up in an unexpected place when he recorded an episode of WTF, a podcast hosted by comedian Mark Merrin. The interview took place at The Mansion, a studio in Laurel Canyon owned by Rick Rubin, and where Atoms for Peace recorded Amok. The location is rumoured to have once been owned by Harry Houdini. The interview began with Tom explaining that he'd gone to another LA landmark, the Magic Castle, a members-only club that requires entrants to give a password to get in. The building appears to have no doors, and inside, magicians perform nightly in multiple theatres. All in all, this appearance provides a new air to Tom, who has not exactly associated himself with the magic arts previously. The absolute drop-dead most surprising place that Tom and Nigel turned up was on Rookie magazine, a website devoted to teenage girls and run by a 16-year-old named Tavi Gevinson, who was already cooler and more fashionable than you. Rookie asked them to host a session of their Ask a Grown Man feature, in which readers are invited to submit any question they desire for answer. The questions submitted seek advice on a very specific and personal relationship problems. The hosts, who have previously included John Hamm, Jimmy Fallon and Judd Apatow, are expected to answer sincerely and thoughtfully. Tom and Nigel advised the girls sagely and with respect on crushes, breakup etiquette and their experiences growing up in all-male schools, and it was brilliant. For once they did an interview that wasn't entirely about them, Radiohead, or the practical aspects of creating their music. There is undoubtedly more unusual press to come now that Tom York has learned to stop worrying and love the bomb.